In this episode, we're going to focus on a foundational capability that makes almost every other privacy task easier: keeping a current inventory of personal information and an accurate picture of how that information flows through the organization. A personal information inventory is a structured record of what personal information exists, where it is stored, what it is used for, who can access it, and how long it is kept. Data flows describe how that information moves, such as from a user to a website, from a website to a database, from a database to analytics, and from analytics to a vendor. For brand new learners, the key idea is that privacy programs struggle when they cannot answer basic questions like what data do we have and where does it go, because you cannot protect, limit, or delete what you cannot find. Keeping the inventory current is hard because organizations change constantly. New features launch, vendors are added, databases evolve, and teams create copies for convenience. Durable processes are the routines and governance mechanisms that keep inventories and data flows accurate over time, so the program does not rely on heroic manual updates once a year. A useful place to start is understanding why inventories and data flows matter beyond compliance paperwork, because their value shows up most during stressful moments. When a person asks for access or deletion, the organization needs to know where that person's data lives so it can respond accurately. When an incident happens, the organization needs to know what data was in the affected system and what downstream systems may have copied it. When a new law requires a new disclosure or control, the organization needs to know which data processing activities are in scope. Inventories also help with minimization, because you can see when data is collected that serves no clear purpose. They support retention, because you can attach retention rules to specific datasets rather than making vague promises. For beginners, the important realization is that inventories and data flows are not just lists. They are the map that allows privacy decisions to be grounded in reality. Without the map, teams guess, and guessing creates both risk and wasted effort. Personal information inventory work begins with defining what counts as personal information in the organization's context, because people can underestimate what is identifying. Direct identifiers like names and email addresses are obvious, but indirect identifiers like device identifiers, account identifiers, and location patterns can also identify a person, especially when combined. Behavioral data can become identifying when it is tied to a stable identifier or when it reveals unique patterns. Some data might not identify a person alone, but becomes personal information when linked with other datasets, which is why linkage matters. Inventories should also capture sensitive categories, because sensitivity changes handling expectations and risk, even when the organization believes it is collecting ordinary data. Beginners should understand that defining personal information is not about being dramatic. It is about being honest about what can be tied back to an individual. A clear definition helps teams classify datasets consistently and prevents gaps where data is treated as harmless simply because it is not a name. After definitions, the next step is choosing what an inventory needs to contain to be useful, because an inventory that is too minimal cannot support real decisions. A useful inventory captures the dataset or system name, the types of personal information involved, the purpose for processing, who owns the data, and which teams or roles access it. It also captures where the data comes from, such as a user form, a device signal, or a partner feed, because source affects expectations and obligations. It captures where the data is stored, including primary storage and significant secondary storage like analytics or support systems, because secondary storage is often where surprises happen. It captures sharing, including vendors and internal recipients, because sharing expands risk and affects transparency. It captures retention and deletion expectations, because the inventory is where you connect data to time. Even without using lists in practice here, the concept is that an inventory is valuable when it supports questions privacy and security teams actually ask under pressure. Data flows add the movement layer, and this layer is where many programs lose track because flows change more often than storage locations do. A data flow describes how data travels between systems, what triggers the transfer, what transformation occurs, and what the receiving system does with it. Transformations matter because data can be enriched, combined, aggregated, or used to generate derived data that has its own privacy profile. For example, Raw activity logs might be transformed into a risk score or a profile segment that influences decisions about a person. Those derived outputs can create privacy impacts even if the raw data seems ordinary. Data flows should also capture whether the transfer is continuous or occasional, because continuous flows create more exposure and make containment harder during incidents. Another important detail is whether the flow includes third parties, because third-party flows often involve different legal and contractual obligations. For beginners, a key takeaway is that data flows reveal where controls must exist, because you control risk by controlling movement and access, not only storage. The challenge is keeping inventories and data flows current, because organizations naturally drift toward data sprawl. Teams add new tracking events, log more details to debug issues, or export datasets to analyze trends, and each change can create new copies and new flows. Vendors add features that change what data is collected or how it is used, and integrations expand quietly as teams connect tools to move faster. If the inventory is updated only by a privacy team once a year, it will be wrong most of the time. That is why Task 14 emphasizes durable processes, meaning a system of updates that happens as part of normal work. Durable processes treat inventory updates as a standard part of change, similar to how organizations treat code changes or production releases. The goal is not perfection, but reliable freshness so the inventory is accurate enough to guide decisions and respond to events. When the inventory becomes stale, people stop trusting it, and then it stops being used, which creates a downward spiral. A durable approach begins by connecting inventory and data flow updates to existing change points in the organization. Projects that introduce new data collection, new uses, or new sharing should trigger an update as part of their normal approval path. Vendor onboarding and vendor changes should trigger updates because vendors are major flow nodes. System changes, such as new databases, new logging behavior, or new analytics pipelines, should trigger updates because they alter where data exists and where it moves. Rights request procedures and incident response can also reveal missing inventory entries, and durable processes use those moments as learning signals to improve completeness. For beginners, it helps to think of inventory maintenance as a living process, not a separate documentation project. When updates are tied to real workflows, they happen more reliably because teams are already in decision mode. This is how an inventory becomes durable. It is sustained by routine, not by heroics. Ownership is another durability requirement, because data inventory maintenance fails when everyone assumes someone else is responsible. Each major dataset or system should have a clear owner who is accountable for keeping inventory details accurate as changes occur. Ownership does not mean doing all the work, but it does mean ensuring updates happen and are validated. Privacy teams often provide guidance and review, but operational teams must participate because they know when changes occur. Durable processes also need escalation paths for ambiguous cases, such as when a team is unsure whether a new event log contains personal information or whether a derived dataset creates new privacy impacts. When ownership and escalation are clear, updates become faster and more accurate because questions get answered rather than ignored. Beginners should see ownership as a control. It reduces the vulnerability of drift by assigning accountability for freshness. Without ownership, inventories become outdated quickly, especially during rapid growth and frequent releases. Quality and consistency also matter, because an inventory can be current but still not useful if entries are inconsistent or vague. Durable processes, therefore, include simple standards for how to describe purpose, data types, sharing, and retention. For example, purpose should be specific enough to distinguish between delivering a service and using data for marketing, because those uses have different expectations. Data types should be described consistently so classification can drive controls. Sharing should specify whether the recipient is internal or external and what the recipient does with the data. Retention should be tied to triggers, such as account closure or contract end, rather than indefinite language. Consistency makes the inventory searchable and makes it easier to compare across systems, which supports risk assessment and compliance reporting. It also reduces misunderstanding when new employees join and rely on the inventory to learn what exists. A durable process, therefore, includes periodic quality checks, not just updates, so the inventory stays trustworthy. Another critical durability feature is ensuring the inventory reflects reality, which requires validation rather than assuming self-reported information is always accurate. Validation can include cross-checking with system documentation, reviewing access patterns, or comparing inventories with known integrations and vendor relationships. It can also involve sampling, where a subset of inventory entries is reviewed in depth to confirm accuracy and to identify patterns of common mistakes. The point is not to create an adversarial audit culture, but to maintain confidence that the inventory is not a fiction. A privacy program that validates inventory quality gains a reliable tool for responding to incidents and rights requests. It also creates a feedback loop where validation findings improve training and improve the update process itself. Beginners should understand that durable processes include both data entry and data integrity, because a current but inaccurate inventory is as dangerous as no inventory at all. Trust in the inventory is what makes teams use it under pressure. As we close, remember that Task 14 is about building the privacy program's map and keeping that map current through routines that can survive change. A current personal information inventory tells you what data exists, why it exists, who touches it, where it is stored, how it is shared, and how long it lives. Accurate data flows show how that information moves and transforms across systems and vendors, which is where many privacy impacts arise. Durable processes keep these resources current by linking updates to existing change points, assigning clear ownership, maintaining consistent descriptions, and validating accuracy over time. When inventories and data flows stay current, privacy decisions become faster and more defensible, incident response becomes more precise, and rights requests become more reliable. When they drift, the program becomes reactive and guest-based, which increases both harm to individuals and risk to the organization. Learning to sustain durable inventory and data flow processes is therefore one of the most practical skills you can develop for privacy engineering and program success.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.